morning. Good morning. Welcome to the 2009 deliberative session for the town of Hampton. My name is Bob Casaz. I'll be serving as your moderator today. I'd like to acknowledge that the warrant has been posted in accordance with RSA 39.5 and 4013, subpart 2. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Hampton Rotary Club is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. The club was founded on March 22nd, 1969, and has served the community since that date. I'm pleased to introduce Hampton Rotary Club Rick Neville, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the pledge. Mr. Neville.
Thank you, Bob. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At the outset, I'd like to announce the officials who are on the stage this morning, beginning with Bill Lally, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Jim Workman, Rick Griffin, Dick Nichols, Dick Bateman, all selectmen. The town clerk, Jane Cipher, the town attorney, Mark Gerald, our town manager, Fred Welch. In the first row of the audience, the chairman of the Budget Committee, Mary Louise Woolsey. Our finance director, Michael Schwotzer, on the far left of the stage. Our administrative assistant, Christina Osman. The supervisors of the checklists are in the hallway, Arlene Andriozzi, Davina Larrabee, and Barbara Renault, and they are assisted this morning by Donna Genados, Martha Williams, and Teresa Ryan. If you are a Hampton resident and you intend to vote at the deliberative session today, you need to check in with the supervisors of the checklist, and they will give you a voting card and instruct you on how to complete that voting card so that you can vote at today's session. Assisting the moderator today are Nancy Stiles, Dennis Kilroy, Nathan Page, Darrell Mosher, Glenn Eastman, and Howard Stiles. I'd like to take a brief moment to explain our work today. Today, we will discuss, debate, and possibly amend the 51 articles set forth in our 2009 warrant, with the exception of those warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law. For example, the zoning articles that you'll see at the beginning of the warrant. It is not necessary to vote these articles onto the ballot. All 51 will appear on the March 10 ballot. The work today of this deliberative session is to determine the wording of those articles, to determine how the articles will appear to the voter on March 10th. Final action will come on that day, March 10th, and we'll be voting for the first time at the Winneconne High School Gymnasium from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Today's rules. We will proceed one article at a time. I will read the article. After the article has been moved and seconded for discussion, I will recognize the proponent of the article first and then open the article for discussion by the Assembly. I will recognize a new speaker on an article before returning to someone who has already spoken on the article, with the exception that the proponent of the article will be permitted to answer questions or offer further details regarding the purpose of the article in response to a question or opinion as appropriate. All questions should be directed to the moderator. If you wish to speak, please wait to be recognized by the moderator and speak into the microphone at the podium at the front of the room. This is critical to ensure that your remarks are carried by Channel 22. The Channel 22 technicians will adjust the microphones if it's necessary, and please begin your remarks by stating your name and your address. We will deal with only one amendment at a time. The amendments must be in writing. We have forms down here for you to write your amendments. After the amendment has been moved and seconded, please give it to me so that I can have it correctly and present it to the Assembly, and the town clerk and the administrative assistant can get it up on the screen so everyone can follow the amendment. Please focus on the content of the amendment or the article, and please refrain from personal comments. I will revoke recognition of any speaker who speaks or acts in an abusive or disruptive manner, and I also will revoke recognition of any speaker who refuses to keep his or her comments relevant to the article under consideration. Non-residents will be allowed to speak only on the affirmative vote of this meeting. If an issue arises during the meeting that is not covered by these rules, I intend to use fairness and the majority rule as guiding principles with due consideration for the minority's right to be heard. This is your meeting, and as a result, my determinations may be overruled by you. Voting will be conducted by voice, hand, or standing vote as appropriate. 5 voters may make a request in writing prior to a vote that the vote be taken by secret written ballot. After the vote has been declared, but before any other business has begun, any non-ballot vote may be questioned by 7 voters, and the vote shall be retaken by secret yes-no ballot. Reconsideration of votes previously taken may be restricted at any time during the meeting by an affirmative vote of the meeting. Please turn off all cell phones while the meeting's in session. Please note the locations of the exits. If the fire alarm activates, please leave the building by the nearest exit. And if anyone needs help, please signal, and we will assist you from the building. And the fire department has asked that all assemble in front of the SAU building in the event of emergency. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to allow non-resident staff of the town of Hampton to speak during the meeting or to answer questions and to provide information regarding the warrant article. And that motion specifically covers the following individuals: Town Manager Frederick Welch, Town Attorney Mark Gerald, Building Inspector Kevin Schultz, Finance Director Mike Schwotzer, Recreation and Parks Director Diana Martin, Assessor Bob Esty, Planner Jamie Steffen, Administrative Assistant Christina Osman, Public Works Director John Price, and Deputy Fire Chief Steve Bonatti. I have a second to that motion? All those in favor raise your voter cards, allowing non-resident staff to assist us during the meeting. Down cards. Any opposed?
Make sure you're legal.
Those individuals will hereafter have the right to speak. As we have done the last several years, we need to position the names on the ballot in something other than alphabetical order. So we will move to Article 1. This year, 2 selectmen for a 3-year term will be selected, 1 tax collector for a 3-year term, 2 trustees of the trust funds for a 3-year term, 2 library trustees for a 3-year term, 2 planning board members for a 3-year term, 1 cemetery trustee for a 3-year term, 4 budget committee members for a 3-year term, and 2 zoning board members for a 3-year term. So now, with the assistance of the town clerk, we'll draw names for each of these positions. The first name drawn will be the first name that appears, and then it will follow sequentially. So the first office is the office of the selectman. And how many names do we have, Jane? We have 5 names for 2 positions. Appearing first on the ballot will be John Jack Lassard. Second, Virginia Bridle. Third, Gerald Jerry Zanoy. Fourth, William Lally. And the 5th name will be Eileen Latimer. For the office of tax collector, there are 2 individuals running for that position. And appearing first on the ballot will be Donna Bennett. And the second name will be Bennett F. Moore. The next office is trustee of the trust funds. 2 positions for a 3-year term. There are 4 individuals running for 2 positions. First name on the ballot will be Francis A. Quinn. Second name on the ballot will be Edward Sandy Buck. Third will be Norman Silberdick. And the 4th name is Edward Atwood. The next office is library trustee. 2 positions for a 3-year term. There are 3 candidates. Appearing first on the ballot will be Peter Generis. Second, Richard J. Larkin. And the third name, Deborah Perry. The next office we'll draw for is cemetery trustee. 1 3-year term. 2 candidates. And the first name which will appear on the ballot is Susan W. Irwin. And the second name, Thomas F. Harrington. Next office is Planning Board. 2 3-year terms, 4 candidates for 2 3-year terms on the Planning Board. First name on the ballot, Bruce Eaton. The second name on the ballot will be Lawrence J. DeFranco, Jr. Followed by Mark Olson. And James Tracy Emmerich. For the Office of Budget Committee, 4 committee members for 3-year term. 5 candidates for 4 spots on the Budget Committee. The first name on the ballot, Sonny Kravitz. Second name on the ballot, Patrick J. Collins. The third name, Richard E. Rainier. The fourth name, Brian W. Lapham. And the final name for Budget Committee, Michael Pluff. The last office that we're drawing for is the Zoning Board. 2 positions, 2 spots. R. Vic Lassard will appear first on the ballot. And William Bill O'Brien will appear second. Thank you, Jane. At this time, we will move to Article 2. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment 1 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 17 to add a new article entitled Small Wind Energy Systems with associated zoning requirements to comply with new RSA 674:62-66 and to renumber the articles that follow accordingly. Recommended by the Planning Board. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 2. Moved by Ms. Woolsey. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Pluff. Is there anyone who would like to speak to that? Mr. Emmert, as chair of the Planning Board.
Tracy Emmerich, 207 North Shore Road, Chairman of the Planning Board. Mr. Moderator, fellow citizens, we're doing something a little different this year from years past. In years past, the entire content of the amendment appeared on the ballot, taking up voluminous amounts of paper. So this year, with advice of council, we're going to have just this on the ballot. The entire body of the amendment is available at the town office. It's available online. It's available 2 boards like this. They're all mounted. out by the supervisor of the checklist. So the content is available publicly, and please avail yourself of that information. I would make just a couple of comments about the wind energy. This has to do primarily with windmills, and some of the high points of the amendment. The amendment would be that the height would be no more than 125 feet, or more than 35 feet taller than surrounding tree canopy. And don't get too nervous, because the setback is the height of the windmill plus 15 feet. So if somebody wants to put up a 125-foot high windmill, they have to be 140 foot from the setback. So it is going to be away. You can't put it in your backyard in a densely populated area. Also, noise limit is 50 decibels. And we tried to get some demonstration about 50 decibels was, but it's less than a vacuum cleaner. So we figured that was not going to be too overwhelming. And with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to Article 2? Ms. Carnaby. And Mr. Emmerich is chair of the Planning Board. Ms. Carnaby, are you chair of the Hampton Energy Committee?
I am. As chair of the Energy Committee, I speak in favor of this amendment. It is to allow people in Hampton to have a wind turbine. The existing regulations don't allow for a structure the height of what would be required for a wind turbine tower. So if you are contemplating a wind turbine, then you need to vote in favor of this amendment. The Energy Committee worked with the Planning Board to hopefully make it simple and understandable, and we urge you to vote in favor of this.
Thank you, Ms. Carnaby. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 2? Seeing none, Article 2 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 3, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 2 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 18 to add a new article entitled Solar Panels with Associated Zoning Requirements to allow for their installation with appropriate safeguards and with due consideration to visual appearance, and to renumber the articles that follow accordingly. Recommended by the Planning Board. Is there a motion to move Article 3 to the floor for discussion? Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Plouffe. Mr. Emmerich, would you like to speak to Article 3?
As in Article 2, the full details are available online and in various places around town. This has to do with solar panels, and specifically it's more addressed to aesthetics, so that people aren't putting solar panels in their front yard. Solar panels need to be on the rear of or back of buildings, can't be any more than 8 feet off the ground if they're mounted individually. And also on roofs, they need to be on the rear or side of roofs and not facing the street. Beyond that, I have nothing to add.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to speak on Article 3? Ms. Carnaby.
On behalf of the Energy Committee, I would urge you to support this article as well. It's for the good of the town, and hopefully will encourage more people to have solar panels and wind turbines, and reduce our carbon footprint for the good of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carnaby. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, sir.
Name is Art Gopalin, 20 Windmill Lane, Hampton. These articles, while I don't particularly, I'm against those, except for the fact what happens, we haven't really discussed about what happens if the neighbor has a tree in front of a solar panel, for example. Does he have to take the tree down? It's a question that I'm raising because a situation in California is developed where the neighbor has been asked to remove the tree in favor of having a solar panel And so the question surrounding this, as well as the previous article, although I didn't put up my hand fast enough, is the question of liability, both in this case as well as in the case of the windmill. If the windmill shears, which happens, and what is the liability and who absorbs the liability? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 3? Seeing none, Article 3 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 4, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 3 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.4, Special Flood Area, and Article 11, Section 11.6, Floodplain Development Regulations to comply with the requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program recommended by the Planning Board. I entertain a motion to open Article 4 for discussion, moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Pluff. Mr. Emmerich, would you like to speak to Article 4?
Yes, Article 4 has to do with our participation in the National Floodplain Insurance Program. So if we elect not to go along with the latest amendments, we will be excluded from the National Floodplain Program, and that's not a very good idea, especially for those of us that live in floodplains. The language is dictated by FEMA. It's not that we didn't rewrite this. They basically said, here, amend your statutes thusly, and so all of the amendments are as directed by FEMA. So I encourage you to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 4? Seeing none, Article 4 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 5, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 4 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 8, Section 8.23 to change the multi-family dwelling setback in all zones from 40 feet to 20 feet, recommended by the Planning Board. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 5? Moved by Mr. DeMarco, seconded by Ms. Woolsey. Would you like to speak to it, Mr. Emmerich?
This amendment applies a lot more to common sense. Over the several years on the Planning Board, many of us have seen that one of the variances that is received are setbacks. And so we question the practicality in Hampton of a 40-foot setback, especially when some lots are 50 by 100. So as a practical matter, and looking at what is actually coming before the Planning Board, we recommend to change from 40-foot setback to 20-foot setback from a sideline or another building.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 5? Seeing, excuse me, Mr. Moody.
Art Moody, 3 Thompson Road. Mr. Moderator, I tried to speak on the first Planning Board article when they mentioned that they're doing something new this year about having just a couple of sentences or one sentence for each article, even though one of them, in fact, is 4 pages long. Speaking of anniversaries, March is the 60th anniversary of zoning in Hampton. And for those 60 annual meetings, whenever there was any zoning matters, the entire zoning ordinance, since we are dealing with laws, ordinances, the entire amendment was printed in the selectman's warrant for the meeting. It became a permanent record, like the congressional record, I guess you could say. Now, under this situation, we're not even having the full article amendment in the selectman's warrant, which gets in the permanent publication of the town report. The full wording is not even in the selectman planning board minutes, which are a permanent record. So it's a very poor new precedent in my estimation. If you want to save some space, you can knock out recommended by the planning board under each of the 7 articles of the planning board, amendment number 1 of the planning board, etc. that caveat is not authorized by that law, RSA 675-3, and has no place on the ballot or in the warrant. I'm against this article because it does cut down open space. We heard that this is in reaction to what the zoning board has done, actually just the last 9 years. The mention of 100 by 50-foot lot, 5,000 square feet. These are at the beach, South Beach, North Beach. And as far as the business seasonal zone in the South Beach is concerned, you can only have 2 dwelling units on a 50 by 100 lot. You need 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit. Multifamily begins at 3 units or more under our definition. You're cutting down open space. You're cutting down buffer from multifamily complexes. And even those that exist can now use that extra space, if this passes, to add more dwelling units and cut down more open space. This is not only a buffer from abutters, is 40 foot that they want to cut in half, but it's also between buildings on multifamily complexes. And I would say that if you put a 100-foot aerial ladder truck between buildings and a complex, some of which we have on Route 1, it may have difficulty deploying that ladder at the right angle to fight any fire. I think this is very poorly advised, and I hope there is a no on Article 5.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard on, Ms. Wilson, on Article 5?
Very briefly, I concur with Mr. Moody, and I'm opposed.
Mr. Emmerich. Thank you, Ms. Woolsey.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to comment on the Mr. Moody's assertion that these are not in our permanent record. These were, we had 2 public hearings on these amendments, and they are included as part of our public record.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 5? Seeing none, Article 5 will appear on the ballot as written. And I'd just like to take a moment to follow up a comment by Mr. Moody and by Mr. Emmerich. It's my understanding that the RSA that Mr. Moody cited, 675-3, does permit the town to summarize the language that the statute uses, is insert a topical description of the substance of the amendment. And that's what I understand that the town has adopted for an approach. But to follow up on Mr. Emmerich's comment, in light of that, at no time is it more important than this year to educate yourself on exactly what these proposed articles intend. So, as Mr. Emmerich stated, the full text is available in the hall. They'll be available in the foyer before you vote on March 10th. I understand they're online, so I would urge all of you to avail yourself of that information before you vote on March 10th. Article 6, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 5 as proposed by the Planning Board and recommended by the Hampton Conservation Commission for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.32, Wetlands Conservation District, definitions and delineations, to add a new subpart F to designate the Hampton Salt Marsh Complex as a prime wetland in accordance with RSA 482-A:15 and Department of Environmental Services regulations. The purpose of this amendment is to afford the Hampton Salt Marsh Complex the additional protections under state law that come with this designation, recommended by the Planning Board. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 6. Moved by Mr. Page. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Page, will you speak to the motion?
Yes, Nathan Page, 200 Drakeside Road, and the Vice Chair of the Conservation Commission. The prime wetlands delineation of the Salt Marsh Complex will help us protect the entire complex in a in a better fashion. And if this approved, if we decide in the future that a piece of it is not appropriate for the prime wetlands ordinance, it can also be removed. So it can be amended after it goes into effect. We're trying to protect 1,700 acres. The prime application process allows for more applicant and abutter input regarding the state to hold public hearings on all projects in the area, making sure that all voices are heard. It'll help alleviate some flooding issues that we have in town, and that pretty much sums it up. If you want to, that will also be published. Other towns that have a prime wetland study, district, have taken land in and out of their prime wetland zone. So it's something that does not lock us into forever as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article number 6? Mr. Emmerich?
Mr. Moderator, fellow citizens, I have to say at the outset I was not in favor of this article because it seemed like we already had Shorelands Protection Act, we had buffer setbacks in our own zoning, so it looked like we were going to wear suspenders and a belt. When reviewing it with the Conservation Commission, one of the things that came out is the fact that if we vote this, we have enforcement support from the state, which means that we don't have to, we can defer to the state and say this is this, and by the way, they have to accept this. Once they accept it, they also accept some level of responsibility for it. So in case of violations, we can have support from the state, and for that reason, I am in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 6? Seeing none. Article 6 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 7, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment number 6 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.32, A1, Wetlands Conservation District definitions and delineations to add the Atlantic Ocean and Hampton Harbor and their associated tidal waters to the definition of tidal wetlands. The purpose of this amendment is to clarify that these wetlands are included in the definition of tidal wetlands for purposes of the protections afforded by the Wetlands Conservation District, recommended by the Planning Board. Do I have a motion to open discussion? Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Page. Mr. Page, would you like to speak to Article 7?
Yes, Nathan Page again back. Ellen picked a good day to leave town, so I could do this for her. The Conservation Commission, we would like you to designate the Atlantic Ocean as a tidal wetland forest to help clarify what we all know. The ocean's wet, so we just would like to get this clarification to help us in doing our due diligence on behalf of the town. So if you could please declare the ocean wet, we could move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 7? Seeing none, Article 7 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 8, are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment number 7 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 11, Section 11.2-B, construction provisions to clarify that as mandated by state law, RSA 155-A:2, the provisions of the state building code and the state fire code shall govern the construction, design, structure, maintenance, and use of all buildings and structures to be erected, and the alteration, renovation, rehabilitation, repair, maintenance, removal, or demolition of all buildings and structures previously erected, recommended by the Planning Board. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 8, moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Plouffe. Mr. Emmerich, would you like to speak to Article 8?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Last year we had a similar article which was defeated because it was held out there was not enough detail. So I thought what I'd do this year is share a little bit of detail with you and tell you how we're going to move forward with this. This is the building code. All right? These are two of the building code, electrical and structural. These are the amendments. All right? If we'd like to read all of the amendments and see how they apply to the code, we can be here for as many months as you'd like. The interesting part about this is that it doesn't matter what we vote. The state has said, the Attorney General says, that all communities, regardless of their local votes, have to use the latest approved building code by the state. So whether we say yay or nay, we have to use the most recent code, and we are. What we're doing this year is we're cleaning up our zoning ordinances so it doesn't say the 2000 code as it does now, because we're actually using the 2006 code. So somebody could come into town, like an insurance company, and say, gee, you're using 6-year-old code here. I don't think I want to insure this structure or this new building. So what we're trying to do is clean up the old language and change the zoning article to match the state law, which says we have to use the latest version regardless of what our vote is. So if we vote yes on this, we will never have to vote on this again, because what we're voting is to say use the most recent state-approved building codes.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 8? Mr. Moody.
Mr. Moderator, I did not question the right of the planning board to gist or give the substance of an article, an amendment on the ballot. I questioned the recommended by the planning board caveat, which is not authorized by that statute. The selectmen's warrant should have the whole amendment, as in the past 60 years. And then the warrant under that would be the question that will go on the ballot, if they choose not to put the whole thing on the ballot, as they did as recently as last year. In fact, in this case, in this building code, state building code, the gists, and by the way, all 7 gists showed up all of a sudden. None of these gists, this wording, which is subjective, unlike the actual amendment, which is not subjective, none of these gists were posted in the packets for the 2 public hearings. The January 7th one was the second one. All of a sudden they showed up. There were no recorded votes on the planning board of any of these articles of theirs in those 2 public hearings. But all of a sudden these constrictions showed up on the selectmen's warrant with nothing else. And the required legal publication for the second hearing on 7 January for this article stated that to amend the construction provisions of Article 11 of the ordinance to update the current building code to conform with the state building code, state fire code, and life safety code as requested by RSA 155A2. And yet, you will find the gist says, as mandated. They changed the wording considerably, in which case the law says they shall have another hearing. But they didn't have time for another hearing. So that mandated word in there is absolutely illegal. And it will follow this section, this article in the zoning forever. And that's what you're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 8? Mr. Emmerich.
Just to correct the record, Mr. Moody's comment, the gists were available at the second public hearing.
I'd like to have a point of personal privilege, Mr. Moderator.
If you would come to the microphone, Mr. Moody.
I said before each of the hearings, those gists were not available on the postings. the two thick postings for each hearing, and I just have the 7 January one. Mr. Emmerich said he was correcting me. They were available at the second hearing. They weren't available beforehand.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else on Article 8? Seeing none, Article 8 will appear on the ballot as written. I've been reminded that we do have headsets for anyone who has difficulty hearing the proceedings. Those are available today. And if you'll see an assistant moderator, if you need one, they'll make sure that you get the equipment. Article 9, are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 8 as petition for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 4, dimensional requirements, Section 4.4, in the RA district to change the maximum number of feet height to 2 stories or 32 feet from 3 stories or 35 feet for properties in a particular portion of one of the RA zones not recommended by the Planning Board. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 9? Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Plouffe. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to Article 9? Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sandy Buck, 5 Toby Street. First of all, I want to strongly offer my opposition to this. This is clearly spot zoning. For those of you that don't know me that well, I used to be the chairman of the planning board, so I do have some experience with this. So, Mr. Moderator, I believe this is a petition warrant article, and as such, I would like to offer an amendment because I believe that this is the only time when an amendment for a petitioned article, zoning article, could be made because it is not allowed at the planning board public hearing. So I would like to offer an amendment.
And before you do that, Mr. Buck, because you and I have had this conversation, and Mr. Buck is correct that typically petition warrant articles can be amended just like any other article, and then we have the overlay that says that planning board articles are final and we cannot amend those. So I'm going to defer to the town attorney to address the issue of a hybrid, a petition planning board article, and get some advice on whether that is amendable or not. Mr. Gerald.
Yes, Article 9 is a petition zoning article. When a zoning ordinance is to be amended, it can be done either by an article raised by the planning board or by the selectmen, or it can be petitioned. And under RSA 675:4, for a method of enactment by petition, there is a specific time frame within which an amendment must be proposed, and then, like the planning board initiated articles, there is a public hearing held on the petition amendment, even though it may not be amended. If amendments were allowed at this deliberative session of petition zoning articles, the planning board would not have the ability to do the public hearing that is required within a specific time frame. Therefore, my advice is that this body not amend the petition zoning articles. We did have a situation like this previously 2 years ago where there was a growth management article. And once that is voted upon by town meeting, then there can be a decision made as to how to challenge that if it's not valid. Unfortunately, I don't believe the state law allows for amendments by this deliberative session of petition zoning articles.
So I guess we boil that down, and the answer is no.
Okay, well, thank you, and I urge everybody to vote no on Article 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Ms. Woolsey.
I think a more relevant question might be, is this another case like we had 2 years ago where petitioners are putting a petition in good faith to find that it's not enforceable? Do we know that yet? Have they been advised?
Ms. Woolsey has posed a question as to whether the petitioner in this instance consulted with the town. Is that the gist
Well,
of the...
or was the petitioner given any guidance of any kind to indicate whether this might not be enforceable?
Let me see if there's anyone up here. Mr. Lally.
I think the planning board talked to these people and said that they strongly disagreed with him.
I don't care whether they disagree or agree. What I'm talking about is not getting the town into a situation where voters are voting on an article in good faith, whether they vote yes or no, and then find out in the end that it's not enforceable, it's not legal.
It has always been the practice that the town doesn't assist people in writing out.
Oh, I know that. But nevertheless, you're accepting a petition in good faith from voters who are asking for relief, and it's about, they should know up front, and certainly the public should know before they go into the voting booth, whether or not this is a valid article to vote on.
All right, Ms. Woolsey, I'm going to simply ask the town attorney, has that issue been studied as to whether, if Article 9 were to pass on March 10th, whether it would be enforceable or not? Has any review of that been undertaken?
Not to my knowledge.
All right, anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 9? Mr. Rice.
I have a question for the moderator. When I first looked at this article, I thought it was a planning board article, and then it says not recommended by the planning board. Only through this discussion did I find out that this is a petitioned article. Is it not the proper format to identify petitioned articles as such on the warrant?
I think excuse me.
Although it would not change any portion of the article itself, should it not be amended or added that this is by petition?
I think you'll find by looking at Article 9 in the first sentence, it references that it's petition.
As petition?
As petition.
It's kind of hidden in there, but it's...
And if you compare it to the preceding articles, you'll see those referenced as being proposed by the planning board. So,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Emmerich.
On the information that's available, it is identified as a petitioned article. The petitioner came forward to the public hearing, and the petitioner is a condominium association. The condominium is on the corner of Kings Highway and High Street, and what they're asking to do is to have the section across Kings Highway between they and Ocean Boulevard restricted in height to 32 feet, where 35 feet is allowed. The planning board was not in favor of this for two reasons. One is this is spot zoning. The second reason is it doesn't seem, if the people in the association want to protect their view, they can do two things. They can buy the properties that are between they and the ocean, or they can buy the air rights of the properties between they and the ocean. Both of those would in some way compensate the individuals that own those properties for being restricted in height. Not interested in doing either of those. The petitioner said, well, they had a right to their view because they pay taxes. Well, and the people who have the property have a right to build what they want to build because they pay taxes. So for that reason, the planning board does not support this article.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Mr. Moody.
Anyone reading this on the ballot for properties in a particular portion of one of the RA zones? Well, by the way, they're called districts if you read their ordinance. They're not zones. Read the definitions. People reading on the ballot wonder if it's my RA zone. Don't know. Now, I cannot understand why the petitioned article, 4 lines, was not put on the ballot as is, as required by that RSA 675-4. The planning board has no right, no authority to change the petition article as they have here. The location of that RA district is in the petitioned article. It was published on the legal ad for the second hearing. First hearing did not even mention any petitioned article, even though it was after the deadline for petition articles. What it reads in the required publication for the second hearing: amend Article 4, emission requirements, Section 4.4, in the RA district to change the maximum number of stories / feet, height to 2 stories or 32 feet. This would pertain to properties in the RA district that are located starting at the west corner of High Street and Kings Highway, ending at the 19th Street east corner. The selectmen received that article on or before 17 December, the deadline. They were required to put it into warrant article format, which means a question. I don't know if they did or not, but what was published is not a question. It should be a question. Later, the town clerk could make it into a question. But that last part of that, not identifying the zone as they had in the petition, is illegal. The petitioners deserve better than that. There's no authority to change a petition warrant article, except for format into a question, in this case, for our type of official ballot voting. And I'm just outraged that they changed what was published for the last hearing into that, which is a change, and it's illegal change, and if they change anything from the publication of this last hearing, they have to have another hearing, which they didn't have time for.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, Article 9 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 10, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $25,856,785. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $25,553,963, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town meeting or by law, or the governing body may hold one special town meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only, provided, however, that if Chapter 300, Sections 33 and 34 of the laws of 2008 as to the state retirement system spiking charge are repealed or amended, then both of the foregoing figures shall automatically be reduced either by the sum of $650,203 in the event of a repeal or by whatever sum results from the enactment of an amendment. Majority vote required. This article is recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Note, this warrant article, operating budget, does not include appropriations proposed in any other warrant article. The fiscal impact note from the Finance Department. The proposed operating budget of $25,856,785 is $1,183,907 more than the budget amount adopted in 2008. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact of the proposed operating budget is 39.1 cents per $1,000 of valuation. The default budget figure of $25,553,963 is $881,085 more than the budget amount adopted in 2008. The estimated 2009 tax rate impact for the default budget is 29.1 cents per $1,000 of valuation. I will entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 10. Moved by Mr. Lally. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Plouffe. As chairman of the Budget Committee, Ms. Woolsey, would you like to speak to Article 10?
Yes, sir, thank you. After 4 difficult years, the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee came together this year. We were pleased to work with the Board of Selectmen and felt that the department heads, the manager, and the selectmen worked very hard to keep expenses in line and still be able to provide the services to the town that we need. We know that these times are not easy for anyone. We also understand that we live in a community where we require public services, and we want to be able to keep them going. I will point out what happened in 2005 when people knee-jerked over a default budget and 4 positions were lost in the fire department, which ended up by costing us a great deal in services and also in money and overtime. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position as a community where we are not supporting our services. The difference between the default budget and the proposed operating budget is quite small. In preparation for coming to talk to you this morning, I've been looking through the news media, and I noticed from the Seacoast Online on January 21st, it says, one by one, a parade of economists apologetic for bearing bad tidings painted a grim picture for New Hampshire and the region lasting into next year. But at the end of the article, it says Sean Warren of the auditing firm KPMG said other states are doing everything from not paying bills to tapping rainy day savings accounts to deal with budget shortfalls from declining revenues. But Warren said short-term fixes may take care of immediate budget problems without resolving the underlying problems. For example, across-the-board cuts may appear attractive, but would exempt fixed spending that can't be cut, such as debt payments, and lead to deeper cuts in other areas of government without examining whether the right cuts were made. Warren said the same applies to layoffs, since government needs the right people in place to be effective. It is not a sustainable way to balance a budget in the long run. So I think that we have struck a balance between our needs and holding back on spending that could really penalize the taxpayer. All of us on the Budget Committee pay our taxes too, but we want to see the community stay healthy, weather the very difficult economic situation that we see now, and proceed forward into the future with a healthy, thriving community. So we will appreciate your vote yes on the operating budget.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Gopalan.
Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Art Gopalan, and I live in 20 Windmill Lane. This morning, I'm proposing an amendment to the town operating budget as set forth in the warrant article number 10 from $25,856,785 to $24,672,878. The proposed amount represents neither an increase nor a decrease to the town operating budget of 2008.
Mr. Gopalan, I'm going to just jump in. If you have that in writing and you have a second, then we can have you speak to that amendment. Is that seconded by Ms. Searle? And I'm going to ask Mr. Kilboy just to get that to you and write that figure down so that we can get the correct figure up that you want to. And then if you give him a piece of paper, Mr. Kilroy, and let him write down the number that he is seeking. And it's been seconded by Ms. Searle. So we have a motion, an amendment, excuse me, to the motion to amend the budget figure to $24,672,878. Is that correct, Mr. Gopal?
Yes, correct.
All right, please speak to your amendment.
Okay. As I was saying, the proposed amount represents neither an increase nor a decrease to the town operating budget. I have lived in this town since 1984. My kids went to school in this town, in this area. My wife and I like living in the town. We understand fully that we need to pay taxes to support the services that we and others in the town receive. From 2000 to 2008, the town operating budget, excluding all warrant articles, have gone up 50%. Inflation during that period has been 23%. the population of the town has only gone up 3%. The proposed town operating budgets for 2004 to 2007 were turned down by the voters in preference to the lower default budgets. The 2008 operating budget, that's last year's budget, was lower than the 2008, that's last year's budget, the default budget, but still, it was 1.5% over the previous year, 2007 budget. So in spite of 4 years of default budgets, during that time period, the operating budgets have always gone up. There has not been a cut or a reduction in operating budget. They may not have been what some people wished for them, but still the operating budgets have gone up. It has always been a budget increase, not a decrease. The operating budget in those 8 years has increased by some 25% in real terms. Not many people that pay taxes have experienced income increase of that amount in real terms, matching the budget growth. You need to note that the proposed town operating budget as it appears on the warrant article today, on warrant article 10, represents a 5% increase over 2008 level and will result in a 6% increase in the town tax rate. The town provides necessary and essential services. Nobody can debate that. Police protection, fire protection, and the public works in terms of sewer, road maintenance, and the transfer station are all essential services. Nevertheless, the town operation is a business. Obviously, it does not turn profit for its investors, but the town as an operating business must contain costs just like every other business. The town enjoys one advantage over a private corporation in that the tax revenues are collected under the force of the law. The level of services has remained about the same since 2000, but it now costs 25% more in real terms, having accounted for inflation. Maybe I need to modify this a little bit. The level of services have decreased in spite of the increase, listening to Ms. Woolsey speak about the 4 firemen that couldn't be hired. What I'm proposing is to neither increase the budget nor decrease it, but to maintain it. I don't think I have to remind you that the country is in deep recession. Many of us who rely on our 401k for retirement income have lost in a big way. Some of us have lost jobs as employers adjust to the economic reality. Foss Manufacturing in Hampton just announced a deep cut in their workforce. Many who are now employed are in fear of losing their jobs in coming months. Governor Lynch just recently reported that the state will have to lay off people. Just about everyone has to trim their spending to get through the recession. We expect that our town must also pitch in and trim the increases which inevitably will result in higher tax payment. Excuse me. A level-funded town operating budget is the right type of help for the town taxpayers during the current recession. Even with the proposed flat budget, our taxes will more than likely go up in 2009 as the revenue projections are likely to be optimistic with continued slide in new car sales, building activities, and decreasing commitment from the state. Yes, it will be a challenge to the town to find ways to maintain the budget flat. But we, as individuals, face the same challenge in our lives. We have complete confidence that our elected town officials and managers will take this challenge in a positive spirit and strive to improve the operating efficiency of the town operations. It may require critically prioritizing the services while reducing the administrative costs. Let us bring our town to be part of our reality that we face. In the matter of the anti-spiking provision, an estimated sum of $650,000 is reportedly included in the personnel administration account of the proposed operating budget. That line item alone is proposed to go up by some $903,000 in 2009. The $650,000 anti-spiking provision is needed to cover an employee of fire department scheduled to retire in 2009, with the fire department operating without a contract. They had reportedly refused to sign an agreement similar to what the police union did, which released the town of that type of crushing hold. I urge the town and the fire department union to consider the terrible impact of that impasse. I don't think the taxpayers can afford to be burdened with something that's artificial and brought on due to adversarial reasons. The error in the pension reform bill that gave rise to the anti-spiking anomaly may be resolved by the legislature, and the $650,000 charge may entirely disappear. But then again, it may not. Cost of doing business for the town will go up significantly if the anti-spiking provisions were not amended. It'll force the town to cut personnel to meet the steep payments required. The town taxpayers are not in a position to absorb that kind of jolt. So I urge the two parties to come together to an agreement, at least on this narrow scope, so that the hanging Damocles sword can be safely put away. Town employees should not lose their jobs over this issue. I urge you to support the flat budget proposals to show that we are all in this together during the tough times that we all face. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalin. Mrs. Searle.
Bonnie Searle, 16 Penniman Lane. Mr. Moderator, I would like to propose a petition to you that we take a yes/no ballot vote on this amendment, Mr. Gopalin's amendment. And I'm prepared to offer amendments to yes/no ballot vote petitions for other amendments if there are any.
Well, I'll entertain as I must, your request for a yes/no secret ballot on Mr. Gopalin's amendment. If you provide me with signatures of 5 individuals. Ms. Searle, are all of these individuals in the room right now?
Yes, they are.
Okay. All right. So we've got people lined up here. I'm going to allow there to be some more discussion on Mr. Gopalin's.
Can there be more amendments before?
No, we have not unless Mr. Gopalin were to withdraw his amendment. We are dealing only with the Gopalin amendment, which proposes to reduce the operating budget to $24,672,878. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the amendment? Mr. Stuker, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes.
If you would proceed to the podium, please.
My name is Larry Stuker. I live at 16 Mace Road. And I'm on the Budget Committee, and I thank Mr. Gopalin for his very thoughtful speech. But I'd like to remind everybody here that the budget process is something that takes a very long time. It's something that is debated by the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee this last year was my first year on it. I'm not an expert like Mary Louise and some of the other folks in here, but I do want to say that every town department head, Chief Sullivan, Chief Silver, Mr. Price, everybody came to us. And they had a very thoughtfully prepared presentation. And we on the Budget Committee represent all political stripes. Every kind of Democrat and Republican is on there, and we voted solidly to support the recommendations that were made to us. And it is tough. Times are tough, and we live in a situation where, as Mr. Gopalin said, and I agree, the economic situation we're in is tough, and believe me, we thought about that when we voted on these things. But I can't tell you how forcibly I stand behind the recommendations of the Budget Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the department heads of this town. They've worked very hard to bring in a budget to provide the kind of service that makes this town great. This town is a great town, and one of the big reasons why it is because of the services that we provide. So it's a very long, drawn-out process. Everybody's had a chance to comment. We've had a lot of people come and talk to us, and I think after that, you see the solidarity that the Budget Committee had with the Board of Selectmen. We don't make these decisions lightly, but I think this is the right budget, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stuker. Mr. Rice.
Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. As a former selectman and former member and chairman of the Budget Committee, I'd like to echo what was just said by Mr. Stuker regarding the process. This budget was not arrived at by a flip of a coin. And one of the criticisms I've had of the budget in past years is that a lot of times we've come up with a budget that the boards that developed it didn't stand behind. This year they all are. And I think that it reflects the fact that every single item on this budget was presented, it was developed by a professional staff for their departments under the direction of the town manager to come up with a minimum budget. It was reviewed, it was negotiated, it was cut or added to as appropriate so that the town got the best bang for the buck out of this. The selectmen massaged it, the Budget Committee massaged it. We elect the selectmen to do these things. We elect the Budget Committee to do these things. We might not always agree with them, but I think that we need to put much more faith in the combined deliberation and judgment of the 5 members here and the 15 members on the Budget Committee who have developed this budget, rather than the single 5-minute oration of one well-meaning and well-intentioned person. I respect Mr. Gopalin and his opinion. I know that he is a very fiscal conservative. I don't like to pay any more taxes any more than anybody else does. I don't have money falling out of the sky that's going to help me pay those taxes. But I also realize from having been on the Board of Selectmen that the things in that operating budget are necessary to run this town. If it was possible to have a flat budget, the exact same dollar figure as last year, that's an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean anything. The default budget was developed by the state to provide the necessary flexibility so that you don't get screwed by the pluses and minuses that are left over from previous years. That is a flat budget. But if you could do what Mr. Gopalin recommends, and you could operate on the exact same dollar figure that you could last year, we'd still be operating on the budget for 1945 or earlier. And everybody knows that's just not possible. From year to year, costs go up. It's an inevitable part of human society. It's always happened in our economy. The cost of everything goes up. One of the reasons that things went up so much in this budget was a lot of the fuel costs were added in there. And that, if you took those back out, which was, the prices have gone back down since these figures were developed, I believe, we'd probably have a figure that was pretty close to the same thing that we had. But I think that we need to use some judgment on this and take the recommendation of the people you've elected to do the job. If you're not going to take the recommendation of these committees, then do away with the Budget Committee and do away with the Board of Selectmen and go to a council form of government. But if you're going to stay with the selectmen and show your faith in them, and you're going to have your faith in the Budget Committee, then take their recommendation. You elected them to do this job. This is what needs to be done. I strongly urge you to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Bridle.
Russ Bridle, 225 Toll Farm Road. I again oppose to this amendment. You know, although well-intended, we all have to look back and think, how much is our oil, how much has our gas gone up over the past 8 years? So yes, there is an increase. This 1.5 is a very small percentage increase. It was brought up the fact that the governor is cutting the budget, and he is, because we are in tough economic times. But last year there was a 17% increase in the state budget, so no wonder why we're having to have those cuts. But again, look back over the 8 years. What has your oil gone up? What are your costs gone up? A 1.5% increase is a very minor increase, and I would encourage you all to oppose this amendment and vote for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridle. Mr. McFarland.
Mark McFarland, 3 Warner Lane. I guess I'd like to echo what Mr. Stuker and Mr. Rice said before me. I do see this as a very small increase. I have great faith in the Budget Committee and the Board of Selectmen coming together this year for the first time in some time. I know department heads came in far less than what they probably would like in more affluent years. And I'd also like to propose that we reject the amendment unless people who, or Mr. Gopalan, can support where that money should come from. I think it kind of absurd to stand up here. I wouldn't myself say, let's take $100,000 out without any idea where it's going to impact or where it should come from. If I could say, I think we let go 2 firefighters, we do away with the rec department, and that's where we find it, that gives you a basis to cast your vote. But without that, I think we have to give our faith to the Budget Committee and the Selectmen as to the budget that they presented originally, and I'd encourage you to vote no on the amendment presented.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Before I get to Mr. Schweitzer, we have a request for a yes-no secret ballot, which we will be conducting, and we'll talk about how that's going to be done in a moment. But I have Mr. Schweitzer, Ms. Latimer, and Mr. Nyan, and then I'd like to take a sense of the meeting as to whether we should proceed to conduct that ballot vote. So, Mr. Schweitzer?
Thank you. I'm not to talk about the amendment. That's up to you. But I do want to point out that in the current budget and in also the default budget, there is the $650,000 provision for the spike charge. If this amendment, at least the way I'm reading it, if this amendment was to pass, then that $650,000 would not appear in the proposed budget. That doesn't mean the spike charge won't be paid. If the charge comes through, we would have to raise or spend from the budget that we're discussing, which is last year's budget, $650,000. That is 2.6%. That is a 2.6% cut in the budget. Additionally, if you read continuing on, provided that Chapter 300, Section 33 is repealed, then the budget would automatically be cut by $650,000. I reiterate, it's another 2.6%. So if the amendment goes through the way it is, there actually is a $650,000 cut, because either we're going to get charged for the spike, or if the law is repealed, per the amendment or per the article, the budget will be cut by $650,000. I just want to make those points available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Ms. Latimer, then Mr. Nyan, and then a sense of the meeting.
These things for tall people. Eileen Latimer, 251 Mill Road, and member of the Budget Committee. Been before you many times in the past 8 years, especially when we talk about this budget, about wants and about needs. Well, a number of years ago, we gave up the wants, and we got down to hard numbers on the needs. And this year in particular, we went so far as to even form a subcommittee for education to overlook the budget on every single line item. We took weeks through the summer, through the fall, so that every element of this budget was looked at, was deciphered, was talked about, because we've gotten to the point, ladies and gentlemen, when we are now taking away from the needs. We made notes to minutes this year in regards to the fire department, saying that although we've gained 4 positions back, we're still understaffed. We made notes to the police budget that said even though We have a good complement of men. We are also on demand in that category too. So when we start looking at this budget and taking another $1 million off, I want you to realize what it means, where you're going with it. And what you're also creating is this hill. Instead of us going at a graduation, we're spiking things ourselves. We're creating our own financial catastrophes because now we're down to the needs and the needs won't go away. We'll put them off for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, but they will eventually catch up with us, and when they do, they always cost us more. So instead of planned spending, what we have is crisis spending. And in a crisis, it always costs you more out of your pocketbook. This budget was very responsible, and the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee don't always agree. As a matter of fact, it's almost our function to disagree so we can get the best for the taxpayer out of our deliberative sessions that we have. This year, we did agree. We did agree on this amount. We're all haunted by that $650,000, and we're all hoping that it goes away. If it doesn't, and you reduce this to Mr. Gopalan's recommendation, you're still going to have to pay it. So then you will have reduced the budget by $1 million, and now you're still going to get the bill for $650,000. None of us like it. Mr. Gopalan, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm probably $1 or $2 off on this number, but I also am listening to everything that Mr. Gopalan is saying and other people have said to me, and we have a tendency to pick numbers out of thin air that we like, and none of us, just like you, I don't like paying 5 cents more on my tax bill than the next guy. But and Mr. Gopalan got up there and said, it's gone up 50%, and people's incomes don't go up like that. Well, I just did some quick math, compounded from 2000, and in fact, if you only had a 3% annual increase, you would have gone up 27% in your income. Now, bear in mind that when we talk about 50%, if you were making $20,000 in the year 2000, you're making $30,000 now, that's a 50% increase. And a lot of us have seen that. A lot of people out there, a lot of our kids have gotten educated, and boy, we're expecting them to make a little bit more. So some of these numbers are sent out there to create fear. Say, what are we doing? Look at where we're going. And I'm actually appealing to you to look over this budget very carefully. Realized it was very keenly scrutinized. We can't fear ourselves into a corner and go backwards, because the ultimate bill, if not this year, next year, is going to be more. It's going to be greater. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Mr. Nyan, and then a sense of the meeting.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. John Nyan, 4 Penniman Lane, Hampton. I'm going to keep my comments brief because I have a bad cough, and I would not want to spend my 3 or 4 minutes coughing. Back in 2003, I became an active resident of Hampton. And I was here at this session back then advocating probably more emotional than factual on the 2 budgets. The budgets that was presented by the selectmen and the budgets that were submitted by the Budget Committee. And I spoke in favor at that time on the budget of the selectmen and not of the Budget Committee. And as I said, at that time I was new. I knew the town officials, and I felt that they were good and their intentions were good. And so my emotional comments at that time shared in favor of the selectmen and against the Budget Committee. That election I lost. And so I made it a point from that point on to really pay more attention to the checks and balances of this town. And particular this year, I took the opportunity, against the wishes of my wife, to watch Channel 22 much more than I had in the past. And I also watched a number of sessions, both from the Selectmen's meeting on Monday night and also the budget sessions. And I also saw people coming into making presentation, the town officials, the department heads, etc. And I tried to listen and play devil's advocate on if we had to look for budget cuts, where could we find those cuts? And unfortunately, I was not able to find any, because I found that everybody that made their presentations came in with the least needed. They didn't come in with any frivolous wants, but they came in with what they needed to do their job. And I learned a lot this past year. I learned that there is checks and balances in this town, but I also learned a very, very important thought that I'd like to share with you all today. And that is, as a previous speaker said, we put our trust in elected officials, whether or not it's a selectman or a budget committee member. And although we might not always agree with what they say, when we vote in March every year to put these folks into office, we have a symbol of trust in those individuals. And I think that when we have a situation today when not only the selectmen but the budget committee concur on a budget, I think we need to put our trust in those two bodies and to vote in favor of that budget. And therefore, I am strongly recommending that we vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nyan. We've had discussion pro and con on the Gopalin amendment. What I'd like right now is a sense, in light of Ms. Searle's request, joined with 4 other citizens for a secret ballot, of whether this body is ready to vote on that secret ballot on the amendment. Up or down, your action, up or down, will produce a result, but we will still be on the budget. So after the vote, whether the amendment is approved or defeated, we will still be in Article 10. I'd like a sense of all those in favor of proceeding to take a secret ballot vote on the amendment. Raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed. So the clear sense of the body is it's time to vote on that amendment, and I'd like to give you a few brief instructions on how that's going to be accomplished. First of all, you need to have a voter card in order to be able to participate. So if you haven't checked in with the supervisors, you need to do so. You'll be given a purple card. You sign it. It will be stamped. Then I'm going to ask you to come down to the front of the room, and you proceed through those double doors. Your card will be inspected. It will be stamped again, in exchange for which you will receive a yes/no ballot. And now this is the part that we need to be clear on. If you vote yes by filling in the oval and depositing in the voting machine, you will be voting in favor of the Gopalin amendment. Yes is to reduce the budget to $24,672,878. So let me say that again. If you vote yes, you're voting to reduce the budget to $24,672,878. If you vote no, you are voting to defeat the Gopalin amendment, and if the Gopalin amendment is defeated, then we're back to the number that's printed in Article 10. So if we are ready to proceed, Mr. Kilroy will assist. I'd ask those who already have their voter cards to come down to the front of the room and proceed. Give us a little time. Make sure that everybody is set up in the hallway. And you will proceed through this door, and you will return to the auditorium from the top door.
Open. Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to see. Did you say 5:37? Is that what I heard? Dennis, get some pens over there.
We got some on that table there, too.
Let's put some, do you have where are the rest of the pens? Where are the rest of the pens?
Here.
Right over there, you can vote. You can vote right down there if you'd like. What's that?
Do you have a water?
I don't. No, no, no. I'm all set. Thank you. Oh, all set.
Everything under control. I'm gonna need to use the ladies' room before we get started again, so if I can go vote, then I can.
You'll have some time to do that.
Good blessing, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I know.
So any other person could get up and make 8,000 amendments. I wrote on my 39 amendments on you as a freshman, since I have to hand it out.
We're ready to resume after the conduct of the yes/no secret ballot vote on the Gopalan amendment. And the results were as follows: 33 yes, 72 no. I declare the Gopalan amendment has been defeated, 72 to 33. We are back on Article 10 as it is printed in your materials. Is there any further discussion on Article 10? Mr. Gopalan, I'm going to recognize someone who hasn't spoken first before I get back to somebody who already has. Mr. Moody.
I noticed that the add-on, the last 5 lines, beginning with provided, however, plus the everything below recommended by Budget Committee, is almost twice as long as the article itself. What authority under 4013 is that included for the ballot, I presume?
It's my understanding, Mr. Moody, that the language below the recommendations, the fiscal impact note, has been placed there by the selectmen consistent with the will of this body as it was exercised 1 or 2 years ago, where the body asked for fiscal impact information to be provided on each money article.
And?
Excuse me?
And the spike, the 650,000 spike, that's not permitted under the format that's included in the 4013 law. Fill in the blanks.
I will defer to the Board of Selectmen or Mr. Schweitzer relative to the language that begins provided. However, Mr. Moody's question is, why is that language in addition to the boilerplate language that appears in 4013?
That figure, we don't know for sure that figure is going to be there in the months to come. The legislature, we've been told by representatives, are working to either postpone that, the amendment, or completely do away with it. So to be on the safe side and let the people know the exact figures, was decided, and I believe Mr. Schweitzer, the town manager and town council, that be added to be a completely transparent number.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Any further discussion on Article 10? Seeing none, Article 10 will appear on the ballot as printed. Motion by Ms. Woolsey to restrict reconsideration of Article 10, seconded by Mr. Buck. All those in favor, raise your voter cards. Down cards. All opposed. Reconsideration of Article 10 has been restricted. Article 11.
Mr. Moderator, yes. If we can go back through 1 through 9 and do the same to...
Second.
Mr. Bateman has moved to restrict reconsideration of all articles prior to Article 10, seconded by Mr. Workman. All in favor, raise your voter cards. Down cards. All opposed. All articles 1 through 10 have now been restricted from further reconsideration. Article 11, shall the town of Hampton vote to modify the elderly exemptions from property tax in the town of Hampton based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers to be as follows. For a person 65 years of age up to 75 years of age, $120,000 from $82,000. For a person 75 years of age up to 80 years of age, $150,000 from $115,000. For a person 80 years of age or older, $165,000 from $147,000. To qualify, the person must have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 5 years, own the real estate individually or jointly, or if the real estate is owned by such person's spouse, they must have been married for at least 5 years. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $38,000 from $30,000, or if married, a combined net income of less than $58,000 from $50,000, and own net assets not in excess of $250,000, excluding the value of the taxpayer's residence, whether single, from $95,000, or married, from $145,000. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note, Finance Department, the estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 3 cents per $1,000 of valuation. I will entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 11.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Workman. Seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Workman, would you care to speak to Article 11?
Yeah, the board attempted to revise these numbers that haven't been adjusted in a couple of years, and a nod to the fact that our senior citizens, the values that were there weren't keeping pace with both what's going on economically and what's happening in the communities that surrounded us. So we attempted to modify them to bring them more in line with current numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Anyone else? Ms. Sheehan?
I want to make an amendment also.
Well, Ms. Sheehan has the microphone.
Joyce Sheehan, 81 Hampton Town Estates. I think this is absolutely wonderful that you're increasing the elderly exemption. Excuse me. As it stands now, with the 82,000 for ages 65 to 74, and then it increases with age. Last year, I shouldn't say last year, I should say in year 2007, when the tax rate was $19.79 per 1,000, the amounts that people were saving were a lot more than the current tax rate of $16.33 per 1,000. And basically, the first two raised amounts of $120,000 and $150,000 are very much in conjunction with what people were saving in 2007 with that current tax rate. However, what I'm asking is if we could increase the 80-plus year elderly from $165,000 to $178,000, based on the fact that the increase of $165 still puts them $500 less savings from what they received in 2007. And the new increase that we're voting on now, on the 65 to 74 age, from $82,000 to $120,000, is a $38,000 increase in their assessed value. The age 75 to 79 is a $35,000 increase in their assessed value over what it currently is. However, the 80-plus years is only an $18,000 increase, far below what the other two are. And therefore, people who are 80 and older are really losing money with the current warrant article the way it is. So if that could be increased, if you vote to increase it to $178,000, that leaves them in the same conjunction as they were before and with everyone else for our senior citizens. So that's what I'm asking, to increase it from $165,000 to $178,000, so that it's even all the way across the board for all our elderly. Thank you.
So, Ms. Sheehan, I understand that you are proposing an amendment to that portion of Article 11 that relates to persons 80 years of age or older, and that you seek to amend the figure as currently stated at $165,000, that you wish that number to read $178,000.
That is correct.
Is there a second to seconded by Mr. DeMarco? Ms. Sheehan, if you could write that down, or Mr. Kilroy's assisting you so that we can have that amendment in writing, and then we can get it up on the screen.
Thank you.
And while you're doing that, Ms. Sheehan, the body may remember that at the outset at the meeting, we drew for offices. One of the offices that we drew for was tax collector, and Ms. Sheehan's name was not among those that we grew out of the envelope. And she is concluding, I believe it's 12 years of service as our town tax collector. And I don't know whether she will make it to the microphone again today, but I wanted to recognize that effort on behalf of the town of Hampton. So we have before us the Sheehan Amendment that changes the figure for 80 plus to 165, from 165 to 178,000. Mr. Griffin, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
No, I have another amendment.
Well, we've got to handle Ms. Sheehan's amendment first. So is there anyone who would like to speak to the Sheehan Amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a vote on the Sheehan Amendment. A yes vote is going to be a vote in favor of increasing the exemption for people 80 years of age or older from 165,000 to 178,000. A no vote is to retain the exemption amount as at the proposed figure of 165,000. All in favor of the Sheehan Amendment, please raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed. I observe that the Sheehan Amendment has passed. So the exemption for 80 plus is now $178,000. Mr. Griffin.
I would like to amend Article 11 in line 6 by changing the number of years of state residence required from 5 years to 3 years to correspond with RSA 7239A as amended.
Right. I'm going to ask you as well. You have that in writing? Is there a second on Mr. Griffin's amendment? Seconded by Mr. Lally. And the amendment, the Griffin amendment, is in line 6 of Article 11 to change the residency requirement from 5 years to 3 years. Mr. Griffin, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I just want to say that, you know, the law, it was changed in the last couple of years and it was just an oversight. So we would like to make it 3 years instead of 5.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the Griffin amendment? Mr. Buck? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sandy Buck, 5 Toby Street. Mr. Griffin, what RSA are you referring to, please, and what is it in relation to?
Yes, I can fill that in. The RSA in question is RSA 72:39-a, which is entitled Conditions for Elderly Exemption. It was amended in the year 2006. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Anyone else wishing to be heard on the Griffin amendment? Seeing none, and we have the language reflected on the screen, consistent with the Griffin amendment, reducing the residency requirement to 3 years. All in favor of the Griffin amendment, raise your voter card, please. Down card. All opposed to the Griffin amendment. I declare that the Griffin amendment has passed. Anyone wishing to be heard further on Article 11 as amended? Mr. Moody.
With that last change, I don't think you'll be able to put a reliable fiscal note on this.
To Mr. Moody's point, I'd ask Mr. Schweitzer if the changes that have been adopted by the body affect the fiscal note, whether we need to get information on that.
I
worked on that exactly, and the fiscal note will not change. The differential in the tax rates would be 3 cents as stated. The numbers were not large enough to move a decimal point.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Anyone wishing to be heard further on Article 11? I think Mr. Schweitzer's comment was that there's not enough people in the calculation to affect the tax rate.
Or the change in the dollars.
Or the change in the dollars. Anyone further on Article 11? Seeing none, Article 11 will appear on the ballot as amended. Article 12, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $69,321 to fund the cost items relating to the Teamsters Local 633 salaries and benefits for 2009. Such sum represents the additional salaries and benefits over the 2008 budget level for the first 2 years that are contained in the collective bargaining agreement between the town of Hampton by its Board of Selectmen and the Teamsters, clerical, PW foremen, PD dispatchers pursuant to RSA 273-A. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Recommended by the Budget Committee. Note, the above agreement is for the years 2009 and 2010. The additional amounts necessary to fund the cost items for the following year are 2010, $92,489, representing a differential of $23,168 over the 2009 budget level. The total additional cost of the agreement for salaries and benefits over the 2008 budget level for the 2 years is $161,810. The estimated future cost of the automatic renewal, evergreen clause, mandated by law to be part of this collective bargaining agreement is as follows. This CBA contains 6 steps of salary increases, with the first increase occurring at the 5th year and the last increase occurring at the 25th year. Assuming that the current pool of unit members remains constant until all members attain the last step over 22 years, the total increases in salary and payroll benefits would amount to $1,837,826, or an average of $83,538 for each of these 22 years. If the pool of unit members changes through retirement, attrition, etc., then the estimated grand total and yearly average will be lower. Fiscal impact from the note from the Finance Department, the estimated 2009 tax rate impact is 2.3 cents per $1,000 of valuation. Is there a motion to open Article 12 for discussion? Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Moved by Mr. Lally.
No, Mr. Moderator, I'm trying to get your attention.
And I would ask that you refrain until we get the article squarely on the floor. Moved by Mr. Lally, seconded by Mr. Workman. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to Article 12? Ms. Woolsey.
What I was trying to do was ask the moderator to take the sense of the deliberative session as to whether we could take Article 14